Oh, you're here. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Happy Sunday morning to you. How's everybody doing? Are you excited? Are you happy? Well, you will be by the time we're done. So we are wrapping up our Happy series this week. We've been at this for about 5 weeks. Next week, we kick off a brand new series called As Long as Nobody Gets Hurt. We're going to be looking at the book of Judges. If you've ever read the book of Judges, you read it and you're like, man, those people are dysfunctional. And it's perfect because it mirrors our society so well. So we're gonna look at that, we're gonna learn from that, and it is going to be a great series. So make sure you come. Beginning of a series, just so you know, is a great time to bring somebody new, so invite some folks to church. If you are new with us this week, however, just to catch you up, we have been looking at what makes us happy. Because we believe that God designed us with a capacity for happiness that we're a lot of times not even coming close to. And that God's desire for us is that we would be happy. But we get confused because we think the happiness that we're looking for are those short-term, quick bursts of happiness. Like we go to the beach in the middle of winter and we're really happy, right? But it only lasts a little while, and then, or we do something that we really like, and we're happy for a little while. But the happiness that drives you, because every one of us is driven towards this thing called happiness, is not the short-term stuff. It's the longer-term, deeply rooted in your soul, contentment, joy, peace, happiness, and you were made for it. And what happens is we get confused and we chase after the short-term happiness and undermine our long-term happiness oftentimes. And what Myron said last week, Myron Jellison, our campus pastor at the Highland, preached last week, and what he said was so profound. If you pursue short-term happiness, if you pursue pleasure over the long-term principles of happiness that we've talked about in this series, you're going to end up with neither. But if you will pursue the principles of happiness that we've talked about, you can have both. And so I really want to encourage you, if you're just coming in at this point in time, go back on our website and you can watch all the sermons from this series. Each one of them is kind of a critical component of this bigger picture of happiness. I want to encourage you to do that. But just to catch you up so you can come along today, we asked the question, what makes you happy? What makes us happy? We decided that it's all about the who's. It's the people in our lives. When relationships are good, we have the foundation for happiness in our life. But if our relational peace is blown up, it's very difficult to find happiness. So happiness is really always about a who or two. We've got people in our lives. And when we're at peace with ourselves, and when we're at peace with other people, and we're at peace with God, we have the basis for happiness in our lives. The other thing that we talked about is that happiness is not an instantaneous thing. It's not the quick bursts of happiness that ultimately make us happy long term. It's sowing into a lifestyle that's different than everybody else is doing. And as we sow into that lifestyle, as we live out the things that Jesus taught, which so often are counterintuitive and countercultural, but as we live those things out, over time, we reap a harvest of happiness. But it's not like overnight. We live in a microwave society when we want it right now. So often when we chase the right now, we end up missing the long term. And so talked about that. We also talked about the fact that you actually have to do it. Like the happiness comes in the application. I've shared this before, but in my basement, I have a 5-gallon tub of asphalt sealer. I don't have an asphalt driveway. I just brought this along from the last house, right? It's been sitting down there for 5 years. It's a rock right now. It serves a purpose, but it doesn't serve the purpose it was created for. Right now, it's just holding a refrigerator door shut. And it works really well for that. But it's only going to fulfill its purpose. Actually, I think it's past date, so it's never going to fulfill its purpose. But if it were going to find happiness as asphalt sealer, it would have to be applied to a driveway. And the same thing is true for us. When we apply what Jesus taught to our lives, he has the recipe, guys. He knows how life is supposed to work. And when we apply what he teaches to our lives, not just learn about it, come to church and go, hey, that's a good idea, and then just keep going doing what we want to do, that doesn't work. But when we apply it, man, we reap a harvest of happiness in our lives. Now, this week, we're going to talk about a principle of happiness that if you can get your heart and your head around, can transform everything for you. This is such a powerful powerful principle of happiness. And this will work whether you're a Christian or not a Christian, whether you believe what I believe or you don't believe what I believe. If you will apply this principle to your life, it will bring more happiness to you. It's not the whole picture, but it's a big, powerful part of the picture. And so this is the principle. Are you ready? Get your pens out. Come on, click, click, click. I'm just kidding. Okay, here's the principle. As long as you are all about you, you will never be happy. As long as you are all about you, you will never be happy. Jesus taught this. Jesus taught this over and over and over again. Modern research is proving this to be true in profound ways. As long as you are all about you, you will never be happy. You need more than you have to offer. And no matter how much you acquire, no matter how much you consume, no matter how much you perfect yourself, you can't acquire, consume, and perfect your way to happiness. You can't. Getting more stuff, if you could get all the stuff you ever wanted, you get to the end of that journey and you would wake up and you would look at it and go, I'm not happy. And you can consume more. You know, I'm going to go out and I'm going to eat fancy meals, and I'm going to go on more vacations, and I'm going to get more for me. And you're going to get to the end of that journey and you're going to look around and go, why am I not happy? I have everything I've ever wanted. Everybody who goes down that road ends up in the same place. You could perfect yourself. You could start going to the gym and get that body that you've always wanted, and you know what's going to happen? You're going to have that body, and you're going to look in the mirror, and you're going to look around you, and you're like, why am I not happy? And the reason you're not happy is because it's all about you. And as long as you are all about you, you will never, ever be happy. This is so, so very profound. Now, what we do is we look around at all the people around us, and now with the advent of social media, we look online and we see people who have what we want, right? And so we look over here and we see this person, like, if I had their job, and if I had their car, and if I had their kids, and you really want your kids, right? No, you don't. You want their kids, and you want their bank account and their retirement account and their spouse, and we put together this composite human being that doesn't exist in reality. There's not one person that has all of that, but we begin to fool ourselves into thinking that it does. And it's all about us and what we can get, and we get consumed with ourselves, pursuing a Frankenstein monster kind of life that doesn't exist in reality. And as long as you are all about you, you will never be happy. But that's where that leads us to, and that is the common condition in 2018, isn't it? That's what we do. We look around and we try and acquire, consume, and perfect our way to happiness. But you can't acquire, consume, and perfect your way to happiness. But you can serve your way there. You can serve your way there. Now, Jesus taught this, as I said. Research today is backing this up in such profound ways. University of Chicago did a study several years ago, and they asked the question, what are the most satisfying job pursuits? Where are people the happiest, the most happy jobs on the planet? You know what they found? This is wild. People who care for other people who teach other people, and people who protect other people. What do all those have in common? Other people, right? It's not about you. Those are the three top pursuits for job satisfaction, for happiness. And you know what else they found? There's no link between more money and more happiness. They found that once the bills are paid, you can double the salary, there's no increase in happiness. It's not about getting more. It is about serving other people. And when we live that way, when we work that way, when we live life in a way that it's not all about us, man, life starts to click in here in a way that really brings us to life. It really brings happiness. And the research backs it up. In the UK, they did a study. They did a review of 40 studies, actually, on the effects of volunteering and serving other people on your health. You know what they found? They found that people who volunteer, and that volunteering in general, decreases depression. It decreases depression. In fact, one study found that it decreases depression more than antidepressant medications decrease depression. It's that profound. I know this is true from personal experience. When I was growing up at Christmas time, I was one of those self-centered kids. Anybody else a self-centered kid? Am I the only one? So I grew up to be a pastor. So anyway, I was a self-centered kid, though. I was focused on myself, and so I'd get Christmas presents, and I would look at what my brother got, and then I'd look at what I got, and I'd compare it. And if I didn't get more than he got, then I would get kind of sad on Christmas Day. Or I would look at what I got compared to my Christmas list, and I'm like, I didn't get what I wanted, and I get kind of, and then you'd play with your toys all day. And anybody ever find that when you play with your toys all day, it's just kind of like, well, And that's how I felt about Christmas. And then when I got a little bit older, my dad started taking my brother and I down to Catholic Charities, and we would cook food for about 500 people in Wheeling. Every Christmas morning, we'd show up, and we'd be cooking with homeless people and people from all over the community and packaging this food, and it was so much fun. And I found that my mood changed considerably. In fact, some of my best memories from Christmas were not sitting around the Christmas tree looking at what I got and playing with what I got, but we're standing next to people making green beans and turkey and ham on Christmas morning. It's so true. This study, or this review of these 40 studies in the UK, found that depression goes down. I can tell you from personal experience, yes, indeed, it does. There's no more fun than you can have than serving other people. But that's not all. Heart disease goes down. Stress goes down. Drug use goes down, unplanned pregnancies goes down, to the point that the people who did this review are suggesting to parents, make your teenagers serve whether they want to or not, against their will with bad attitudes. Make them serve, because it has that profound of an impact on drug use and unplanned pregnancies. And once they start serving, what they're going to find is there's purpose in that, and their whole outlook is going to shift. They also found that volunteering increases psychological well-being. You're more psychologically well when you're serving other people. They found that physical health increases, self-esteem increases, longevity. You live longer when you serve other people. They've got scientific data to back that up. And quality of life goes up when you serve other people. This is profound stuff. One study found that volunteering strengthens your immune system. You fight disease and cancer and all kinds of other things better. Your body does. Physiologically, somewhere deep inside your cellular level, you are fighting disease better when you serve other people. This is revolutionary, but it's not all that revolutionary, because 2,000 years ago, Jesus said, if you want to be great, serve other people. If you want to be my follower, the two most important things you can do is love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus wasn't just talking about warm, fuzzy feelings. He was talking about living a lifestyle of love, serving people. It's powerful. So it turns out one of the best things you can do for yourself is not focus so much on yourself. How about that? But this is completely contrary to the messaging that we get in our culture and our society, isn't it? We hear things like, look out for number one. All the marketing is like, you won't be happy until you get this thing. And it's all about you. But that's not what leads to happiness. Selflessness leads to happiness. Selflessness leads to better health. And Jesus understood this. Turns out Jesus was really smart. Because it's not just in this part of life that what Jesus taught works. It's everywhere. If we will live the way Jesus taught, man, life begins to click. It begins to make sense. And we begin to come alive on the inside. Now, many of you have experienced this, haven't you? There's a lot of y'all who volunteer here at the church or in other places, and you get this. You've experienced it. You show up early on Sunday morning, and you set up the children's areas, and you make coffee and put out the donut holes, which don't make people feel better, but they kind of do emotionally, at least for a moment, so we put them out. And such a conundrum with the whole donut hole thing, anyway. You know, you come and you sit with kids and you hang out in the parking lots and help people find parking spots, and you greet people, and you know that what you're doing is helping people find and follow God, that as people discover that Jesus loves them and died for them, that their lives are transformed. And you get to be a part of that. And you get to be a part of not just changing their life, but their eternity and their kids' lives and their kids' kids' lives. And there is meaning in that, and there's purpose in that. And it's not all about you. And sometimes it's very uncomfortable. Sometimes it's hard work. And that's okay. In fact, I find the harder I work, the better I feel. So eat beans at every meal. I'm sorry. That was not anywhere in here. No, last weekend I was up at the Highlands. So, you know, when we think we work hard here, up at the Highlands, the first crew rolls in at 7 a.m. to unload a trailer and transform the theater into a church auditorium. They have to set up the sound and the lighting and get everything ready to go, create an environment there. 3 of the people who roll in at 7 a.m. are teenagers, and they work hard. And they are having a blast up there. And then the rest of the crew comes in around 8, and they set up all the other environments, the kids' environments. They have to literally set up everything, the lobby, coffee, donuts, the whole deal. And there's such life. You can just feel it. They work so hard. Last week at around 9 o'clock, I circled everybody up in the lobby and just said, hey, let's pray together. And there was like 30 people in this circle. We had to go all the way to the front to find a spot big enough. And you could just see people were excited to be there, smiles on their faces, purpose in what we're doing. I said, guys, for a moment, just breathe the rarefied air of there's a group of about 30 people here with smiles on their faces because you guys are helping people find and follow God. You are serving your neighbors, and you see your neighbors and your friends and your family members come in here, and you get to see their lives transformed, and you get to be a part of that. And this is fun. You know, and they're there 2 hours early, making it all happen for a 10 o'clock church service. And they leave at the end of the day tired, but full. Now, wow, how does that work? Why are we fuller after we pour ourselves out? Why are we happier when we're focused on other people? It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? But it works. And the reason it works is this. This is how you were designed. God designed you. He made you. He put you together piece by piece. And he designed you to pour your life out, not to just consume. And when we consume, and we don't pour ourselves out, man, bad things happen in here over time. You were made this way. You were made to live open-handed. You were made to serve other people. It's one of the secrets of life, guys. You were made to live out the one another's that we find in the New Testament. You know, in the New Testament, if you read through the New Testament, there are about 50-some one another's. Love one another, serve one another, pray for one another, encourage one another, bear one another's burdens, lift one another up, and on and on and on and on. Now, what is it about the one another's that ties in with this message? It's not about us, right? 50-some of them, and it's the way to live life. You know, the primary place we get to live out the one another's in church world is in grow groups. And it just so happens grow groups are starting this week. But if you go to a group and you go and you're like, what am I going to get out of this? Teach me something I don't know. You're not going to get much out of it. But if you go in going, how can I encourage? How can I support? How can we bear one another's burdens? How can I pray for? How can I serve? Man, that's an environment where you can begin to get to know some one another people and have those one another interactions, and it's not all about you. And man, those places, when that happens and that starts clicking in a group, that's life. It's powerful. And so that's a great place for that to happen. But a lot of us would say, well, I don't have time for that. Well, according to the research, you don't have time not to do that. Like, you might have to reprioritize life a little bit. I think some of us we're just kind of on autopilot. We never think about what we do with our time. But at this point, just cruising through life on autopilot, our life and our time is budgeted all about us. And you might have to take a step back and go, what do I need to change? What do I need to do less of? How many hours am I wasting watching Netflix? You know, I have a friend who shall remain nameless who is now going through the fourth time through the entire Office catalog. You know, anybody watch The Office? Don't raise your hand and don't answer that in church. I'm just saying. Anyway, do you know how many hours that is? Fourth time going through one time, 137 and a half hours. If you were to watch that on 8-hour days, which some of you do, 17 days of your life you'll never get back. What if we rebudgeted our time? What if we looked at what we're doing and said, you know what, it's not all about me, it's not all about my kids, that's the other thing. Like, yes, your kids need to have enrichment activities, but if life is all about your kids, something's out of balance. Serve with your kids. Take some of your time that you're wasting on other things and serve, and it will energize you. It will bring life to you because this is the way you were created. One of the best things you can do for you is quit doing so much for you. And so I challenge you. Look at your life. Look where are the time suckers? Where are you wasting your time on meaningless stuff? And begin to serve. Begin to reevaluate your life. Selfishness is natural, isn't it? I mean, we see it in kids. As soon as they're able to express themselves, they're selfish. But selfishness is a result of brokenness. It's a result of sin. It's a result of being born into this sinful world and being infected with sin. It's natural, but it's not the design. And the problem with sin is sin separates us. It separates us into our own little self-centered worlds, and it whispers in our ears and says, you'll be happier if you make life all about you. And then we begin to believe it. And then we get on the treadmill, and life becomes all about us. And then we begin to wonder, why? Man, there's got to be more to life than this. And there is. And there is. If you want to be happy, you've got to find a way to give yourself away. You've got to find a way to pour yourself out. Because you'll never be happy as long as life is all about you. Just look at the happy people you know. The happiest people you know figured this out. You know, and they may not make as much as you do. They might not be as good looking as you are. They probably aren't. And their kids are definitely not as smart as your kids. But somehow they're happy. Somehow they have something that you don't, this contentment and this peace, because they figured out a way to give their lives away. And guys, this is one of the secrets of life. This is something that Jesus understood and taught over and over and over again. In Galatians, the book of Galatians, which is really just a letter that the Apostle Paul was writing to the church in Galatia, he lays out this contrast in chapter 5 between living for myself, living to fill myself out, and living to pour myself out. And he says in verse 19, this is a really extreme, an extreme juxtaposition. It's an extreme comparison, but it really paints the picture so beautifully. He says this, he says, the acts of the flesh are obvious. The acts of the flesh are where sin leads us. The acts of sin, our sinful nature, what we would do if there were no consequences, we weren't taught any different, just because it feels good, if it feels good, do it, and that's where we go. And so this is what we would do if there was no restraint in our lives. And he says they're obvious, but then he goes on to list them, so maybe they're not all that obvious. We'll read them. He says sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, which is extreme sexual immorality, adultery, using God or whatever else we can use in our lives to try and get what we want, witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. Sounds like a fun list, huh? Anybody want to live in a world like that? I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God. When you live, see, all of these are appetites. All of these are things where, like, I'm going to make me feel good, and really just temporarily. But it's all about me. They're appetites that we feed. And the problem with appetites, as we've talked about in this series already, is that appetites, when you feed them, they get bigger. They're satisfied temporarily, but then they come back with a vengeance, and we want more, and we want more. And the problem is that sooner or later, it's insatiable. You won't be able to get enough. I was talking to a friend last week about the opioid crisis in our community. And I think heroin is such a clear example of what sin does in our life. I mean, it's just crystal clear. Paul says that we become slaves of sin. But here's what happens. You do it once, feels really good, and so you want to do it again. But it doesn't feel quite as good. And then you start chasing something that you can't catch. And the more you do it, the more it destroys your life, it destroys your relationships, and it will eventually kill you, and you'll never quite get what you're looking for again. And then you're frustrated. And if you've ever met an addict, at the end of that road, they are the most unhappy people on the face of the earth. And the same thing is true with all these other things that we just listed. They will eventually leave you wanting more, and you'll never satisfy it, and you will be frustrated, and you will be miserable, because that's where filling ourselves up ultimately leads. If we live only to fill ourselves up, we end up in not good places. But then Paul contrasts it. He says the fruit of the Spirit is this. It's love, joy, peace, forbearance, which is patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Now, that sounds like happy to me. But that's also living in a way that is pouring myself out for the sake of others. And that is where life, that's happy. Can you imagine a society that ran that way? Just if everybody in Wheeling lived that way, can you imagine what life would look like? It'd be a pretty happy place. It'd be better than Mayberry. We wouldn't have to lock the doors. We wouldn't need traffic lights. We could we could lower taxes, because we wouldn't need traffic lights. We could, everybody would just stop at the intersections and wave everybody by. It'd be great, how you doing? It'd be ideal. What if our nation ran that way? You know what Paul says? He says something so absolutely profound. He says, against such things, the fruit of the Spirit, there's no law. You don't need law. We don't need the police. We don't need any of that. Because when we live that way, and guys, you were designed to live that way. I was designed to live that way. When we live that way, all this life, but when we live to just fill ourselves up, it ends in death. It robs us of our happiness. And I don't want that for you. And I don't think you want that for you. Can you imagine if the whole world reflected that second list? We live on a pretty happy planet. And the bigger thing is fear. We wouldn't have anything to fear. The level of anxiety in our culture today is off the charts. You don't have anything to fear when people live that way. It's powerful. At the end of the day, don't be the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea? In Israel, there's two inland seas. They're actually lakes, but they call them seas. One of them is the Dead Sea, and that's in the southern part of Israel. One of them is the Sea of Galilee. That's where Jesus did all his miracles, walked on the water, and called his disciples. He hung out on the Sea of Galilee a lot. The Sea of Galilee, in the northern part of the country, is full of life. It has all these streams that flow into it. We're going to put a picture of it up here. It has all these streams that flow into it. You can see that. And then at the southernmost point, the Jordan River flows out of it. So it overflows, comes down the Jordan River, and goes into the Dead Sea. Now, the Dead Sea is at a very low point on the Earth's surface, so the water does not run out of the Dead Sea. Now, you would think that the Dead Sea would just fill up and fill up and fill up and fill up. But what happens is the water runs into the Dead Sea, and it evaporates, and it leaves all the minerals behind. And so over time, the reason they call it the Dead Sea is it's become toxic and nothing can live in it. Because when something doesn't pour out what's coming into it, it eventually becomes toxic. And the same thing is true for us. When we do not pour our lives out for the sake of God and the sake of other people, and we just go to church and say, Pastor, feed me, and we go to Bible study and say, feed me, and we're just trying to get for me and mine. but we're not pouring out. You will become toxic over time. But here's something that you might not know about the Dead Sea. Not only is it toxic, but in recent years, and this is kind of a mystery, it's shrinking. Its water is pouring in, but it is evaporating at a faster rate than it's pouring in. So not only is it toxic, but it's becoming smaller. And the same thing happens to us. You will become toxic, and then over time, your heart will begin to shrink. And it doesn't matter how much you pour in, you'll find yourself coming up empty in the end. Don't be the Dead Sea. Guys, you want to be the Sea of Galilee, where water is pouring in, but you are pouring out. And as you do this, it's counterintuitive. It doesn't make sense. And yet it works. And it works in the Sea of Galilee, and it works in your life as you begin to serve and give yourself away and pour yourself out. You come alive, and you find that you're fuller than you were if you just kept it all for yourself. You were designed by the giver of life to give your life away. It's part of your makeup. It's part of your DNA. It's how you were wired. So are you doing it? Are you doing it? Because that's where you're going to find life. Happy is the person who figures out a way to give their life away. And very sad will the person be who doesn't. And I want you to be happy. And I think you want to be happy. This you have to get. You have to get it. Now, if you come to the church here and you serve on a regular basis, I just want to be really clear here at the end of this message. I am not saying, you need to do more. That's not what I'm saying at all. In fact, I want to say thank you on behalf of me and all the people who are finding and following God, and on behalf of all the people who come and attend at this church. We've all benefited from what you do. Our kids are benefiting from what you do. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. But if you're not serving here or somewhere else, I don't want you to leave today and not have decided to do something about that. You need to do it if you want to be happy. And so I personally think that there's no cause greater than the local church. And of course you're sitting there thinking, of course you think that, you're the pastor. But really, I mean, we're talking about life change, eternity change, generational change. We get to impact people's lives on so many levels. And it's so fun to do together. And so I think the church is a great place to do that, but I want you to make a decision today either to serve here or serve somewhere else, or get into a group and go in with the mindset that I'm going to serve the people in that group. But I want you to make a decision today, because leaving here and not doing anything about it isn't going to do you any good. You'll just have heard another message and go, yeah, that's good. All right. And then you'll go out and do the same thing that you've always done. Make a decision today. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. You got a program on the way in, and you got a Connect card. And for all the people who didn't rip off the Connect cards, rip them off. I'm watching. I want you to make a decision. Everybody should fill this out. Like if you're going to volunteer somewhere else, one of our community partners or somewhere else in the community, write that in here. That's great. If you want to volunteer for a ministry in the church, you got this card, Connect with our ministry teams. This was in your program. Pull that out, look over the opportunities, and then there are corresponding places you can check on the back of this card. If you decide you want to be in a grow group instead and serve and live out the one another's in that way, pull out this catalog. We're going to do this right now, guys, so you can go ahead and get these out. I'm going to give you an awkwardly long amount of time to do this, okay? You're going to be like, okay, when's the church service going to move on? Really, I would just warn you ahead of time, because I want you to actually do this. I do. This is so important. All right, so find a group, find a place to serve, or find both, but do something. Don't just sit there, do something. And this is because I love you. And this is because I want you to be happy. And I know you want to be happy. Figure out a way to serve. And again, if you don't want to serve here, you want to serve somewhere else, write it at the bottom so we can be praying for you. All right? We're going to take an awkwardly long amount of time now. and you're going to sit and you're going to look through these and you're going to pick something. And then you can just be mad at me later. So let me pray for us, and then let's get awkward. Lord, thank you so much that you created us to pour ourselves out. Lord, that this little nugget, this little secret of life is so profound and so powerful. God, and I pray that there would not be one person within the sound of my voice that would miss the opportunity to step in and give their lives away. In Jesus' name, amen.